Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make a lot or a little bit of money on the internet, and even how to potentially make a lot of money and lose it all because you sell too early. That's going to be one of the things we talk about in just a moment today too. As always, I'm your host, Bchek. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary, and Sammy. We're going to get into all of the NFT market news, as well as some big news in crypto from the past 24 hours. But just before we do that, just a reminder, friends, that nothing that we say here is financial advice. We do not know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, today is Tuesday. It is the 5th of March. How are you doing?
GM, doing absolutely fantastic. I feel like yesterday has been by far my best day this year in terms of trading and in terms of being up.
Ooh,
So I'm still
explain.
riding that adrenaline high into Tuesday.
Well, let's do a nice little positive versus negative. You can say what's going so well for you at the moment, and I will explain how I am losing money by selling too early.
Love it. What went well yesterday? The shuffle airdrop that I've been
Oh,
talking about
yep.
for probably months on the show and annoying everyone with it
Yes,
is
you did.
one of my biggest airdrops to be claimed so far. So that's been going fantastic and made it very, very profitable day. Bit of meme coin trading that also went well.
Mhm.
I think there's another thing launching today on Blast. I invested in Matrix, I think, that was supposed to launch yesterday or this morning, but it got postponed. So looking forward to see what that will do. It's also a Gamblify thing. Don't know too much about it, but hey, it's Degen season.
It is DGen season, particularly on Blast. So that is good to hear from your perspective. From my perspective, I just saw my dog coin. I had a dog coin thesis at the start of this year. I was like, let me just sit in some dog coins. I had bought Doge, and it was just sitting doing nothing for ages and ages and ages. And on top of that, I'd bought Myro, which is the Solana, one of the Solana dog coins that isn't with. And I'd been sitting in that for ages and ages and ages. It pumped from, I think I got in like 0.02 on Myro, pumped to 0.24, something like that. And I was like, cool, that's fine. I'm not selling it. I'm here for the long term. Then it retraced loads. I think I still sold it for like a 4 or 5x because I wanted to buy more Bitcoin basically. And I basically wanted to buy more Bitcoin. And today Myro went to like 0.35 or something. And I think there might be rumors of it having a Binance listing as well. So things are just going completely insane at the moment. WIF, you might have seen, if people haven't seen already, has got its Binance listing and is going crazy as a consequence too. Doge is up from those lows of around 0.09 cents or zero point 0.1, lower, even lower, 0.08 to point. I think it hit 0.2. It's retraced a little bit. And of course, I'd sold that as well for Bitcoin or something at some point in time before it made this move. So definitely guilty of not being able to wait long enough. Having said that, what I've put the stuff in to is probably going to do very well as well. But we're definitely in that season where you're the things that like if you're making a 3 to 4x and the thing that you were in is doing a 6 or 7x, you're just beating yourself up about it. But I hope you can tell I'm not beating myself too much because this is just the game we're in. Got to take what's on the table and just deal with it. Deal with it with a smile on your face. Be happy for the wins and just keep it moving. Keep it moving. Sammy, how are you doing, my friend? What are your reflections on the type of season that we're moving into? Is crazy meme coin season. Everything seems to be moving. How are you dealing with it at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to keep your attention on. So I think just trying to remain focused. But yeah, just on the WIF stuff, I also sold half my stack
Okay.
about a week ago. So I think it was around about the 80 cents mark. But I rotated it into another dog coin, and that's not doing as well. So yeah, I don't take any advice from me. And yeah, I think what was it? I saw something about Myro was being discussed at ETH Denver as well. So I don't know if that's, or is it Mog and Myro? So
Mog.
yeah.
It was Mog and Pepe. No. I don't know. It was Morgan something, but I heard people talking about Mog quite a lot.
Yeah. So yeah, I've just got my eyes on that because you'd expect if WIF's just been listed on Binance, you'd probably expect a few more that are kind of coming through to be listed as well. So my attention's on that.
Who knows? Who knows? My feeling with this stuff is that you can probably, I'm not saying guaranteed, you can probably buy anything. Well, certainly you could like a week ago, and everything's just going to move is moving up across the board. And then of course you can beat yourself up about like this has moved up 2x, that moved up 3x, that moved up 6x, and maybe you're even selling your 2x into something else, being like, oh, it's underperforming now, but you still got the 2x, right? Like that's not normal to be able to 2x your holdings in like 2 weeks or something crazy. So it's definitely about perspective here, I think, and just making sure you're not beating yourself up unnecessarily. Although I am going to beat myself a little bit up just to try to be a little bit more patient. Legendary, any reflections on this kind of conversation between allocations to the more riskier stuff? How are you thinking about it at the moment?
Yeah, just adding first to that point of it's all about perspective. I feel like that also holds true for gas fees because yet again my feed is full of people complaining that a transaction is $50. And
Interesting.
like if you ape into something with $500 and you double it up, and yes, paying $50 is annoying, but you still almost double up your stack within maybe 3 hours, 2 days, whatever trade you're doing, and you won't get those kinds of returns anywhere else. So that gas fee complaint is so absurd, and seeing people saying that they want to move away their attention from ETH layer 1 because they don't want to pay the gas fees and thus foregoing opportunities that they could otherwise seize just doesn't make sense in my book.
That is a great point. I actually want to talk about that a little bit more because I think it'd be super interesting for people, and people will be curious about this. I saw a tweet from Loopify, and maybe this is what you were referencing. Although I think a variety of people have been complaining about gas fees, saying ETH is too expensive, blah, blah, blah. Solana is the future solution, whatever. It's so much better, etc., etc. Now, I completely accept that Solana is actually awesome for this particular thing. And I do also think Loopify is awesome and agree with like loads and loads of stuff that he says. He's a really awesome person to follow and kind of take wisdom from. But I disagreed with this point. I'm trying to find it so I can show it to people on screen. Here we go. So it was this point about, let's get it up for the people who are watching. Got 25 people live across X and YouTube watching in. Here we go. I would not recommend anyone below $50,000 to use ETH-L1 at this point for trading up. 10 trades at $50 gas fees is 1% of your portfolio getting eaten up. There are so many other opportunities out there. And I don't know. The reason why I didn't know about this was because I thought that we've kind of been here before, and ETH, we're paying outrageous gas fees in the cycle of 2021. And we didn't care because it's relative to the potential that you can make, right? So long as there is an opportunity on a particular chain, even if the playing fee is quite high, we will play and we will go for it if the potential win is high. Now, I wonder whether there's actually something relative going on, which is because ETH is like higher pay to play, the potential prizes are typically higher as well. And because Solana is lower pay to play, you'll get people flipping for smaller points. And the reason why I think that's true is because we were talking about YOLO games, which is this casino thing on Blast at the moment. And I saw some people native to Solana talking about it, being like, wow, this is crazy. Like, look at all the amount of ETH that people are throwing in to YOLO games, because they're used to seeing very similar games being played on Solana for like $1, $2. And so it's like, look, it's a different game. Which one do you want to play on? Do you want to try to win a few dollars on the Solana equivalent, or do you want to play in this game where the stakes are a little bit higher? Legendary, what are your reflections on this idea of like ETH shouldn't be on the table if you're playing with a smaller stack? You've got more opportunities on Solana or elsewhere where you don't need to pay such high fees?
Yeah, first of all, also very much love Loopify, one of the
Yes.
definitely smartest people in this space. This is one of the very few takes that I completely disagree with, though, because in essence, if you can't outtrade 1% in gas fees that he references in that example, if you can't outtrade those $50, then maybe you shouldn't be trading. Like if you do a trade on ETH, the thought is not, oh, I'm gonna ape in $500 and hopefully that thing does $520, so I made myself a free $20 win. That's something you might be able to do in another chain, but that's not the mindset that you would have if gas is that high. And as you said, it ups the stakes, it ups the potential gain. But I think if for whatever reason, I don't want to name a specific project so people don't put it in my mouth, but you have a specific project on ETH and you have the highest conviction in that, and you have a small stack, say you play around with 1 ETH in total, and you're like, I want to put 0.2 ETH into that, and buying that JPEG comes with a $100 price tag in gas fees to exaggerate it even further. Why shouldn't you do it if you're like convinced this is the best play that you have and you think this is going to do a 2x even or 3x? Not even talking about like absurd 100x numbers. Why shouldn't you do that? Like if that's just the best opportunity you had identified. And I do agree with the other point that you made. And I actually think that like Gamblify is a very good comparison because it just shows you the willingness of people to throw money at random shit. And YOLO games, just with a minimum bet of 0.01 ETH, like seems low to ETH users in that way, but it's like $40. And if you translate it to Sol, if you had a casino with 0.33 Sol minimum bet, that would look weird. Like I wouldn't want to participate in that. I would be like, I have no issue throwing money into YOLO games.
Yeah.
But having a casino where like my minimum bet size is 0.33 Sol and I do 3 spins and 1 Sol is gone, again, goes back to unit bias. But also definitely goes back to a different user demographic. Although I also think that by now we do have serious money that has moved into Solana already.
Yes.
We have protocols with significant TVL. We have Madlets with, even in ETH terms, denominated significant floor prices. But there's like still more to be done on the smaller stake side of things, and that got completely eliminated. Like if you are chasing a $10 to $20 flip, that you can't do on ETH. There's like no point arguing about that, at least not on mainnet.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sammy, any further reflections on that? Like when people are thinking about this now, maybe coming to this new, do you think that the best place to start is Solana, irrespective of the fees actually now? So we've spoken about the fees. Okay, fine. It's cheaper on Solana. It's more expensive on ETH. Where do you think the best place for people to start is, irrespective of the cost of entry?
Well, I guess it's where the opportunity is, and you touched on the saturation of Solana because you have that lower barrier to entry. I do think that's shifting a little bit because you have some pretty decent applications being built on Solana now. I mean, I use Parcel as an example. Like I'm a massive advocate of their real estate indices and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you see some of the big whales at the top of that leaderboard. They've got billions of points, which they've got to have traded significant amounts of money to do that. So I think there is like probably a bit more diversity or disparity between the low end traders on Solana, and then you've got the bigger whales that probably want to kind of dominate it. But I do think that ETH, I think Sagar made a post recently about EIP 4844 and how that's going to reduce the transaction costs on, I think, the settlement on ETH, more so on the L2. So you might see a lot more activity to the likes of Blast or these other L2s as that goes through. But yeah, I mean, I'm hooked on YOLO Games. Is pretty decent. I think there's another one called Play Cambria, which is like a PvP dual arena RuneScape style thing. So that's kind of picking up as well on Blast. So there's a lot of applications that you can now use. I just think I tend to agree with Loopify's statement for probably about a 10K stack, but a 50K stack, like I think that's more than enough to play around with on ETH. A 10K stack, if you're paying those gas fees, then it does erode it pretty quickly and you have less opportunity to find those wins than you would on Solana or the L2s.
Again, I kind of see what you mean, but I think I started with less than 10K back in whenever I did in 2021, like 2 ETH. I think I started throwing around at one point in time and it's fine. Like it's completely fine.
But I think the times have changed a little bit from 2021 because everyone was using that. There wasn't really an alternative. I think the applications and stuff have been built up a lot more since then. So there is more opportunity on on other chains now than there was back in 2021. So I think if everyone's playing in the ETH arena, then it makes sense to be there. But because there's opportunity elsewhere and it's kind of spread out, I wouldn't necessarily go all in on ETH.
Yeah, I take that point. If anything, the main reason why I would look elsewhere from ETH, and it's probably why I'd actually look at Bitcoin at the moment, is because the stuff on ETH, it doesn't, like, it's just not the case anymore that all of the good stuff is on ETH. Like, and I think that's your point, right? There's just loads of good stuff elsewhere. And it's certainly not the case that the things that you used your ETH to buy, like, are going to be going up, like, definitively, because if anything, we're having that moment on with ordinals at the moment where there's so few things to buy and all the attention is there, and people just seem to don't have a huge choice. And that's what it was like for ETH in 2021 when these NFT projects were coming out and everything just went up because there wasn't a huge selection. And then over time, those things matured, and as a consequence, there was like more competition, more time for people to fail. And whereas Bitcoin is in this, I would say, almost a honeymoon period for those ordinals on Bitcoin. And I'd consider moving over there if I was coming completely new like that. And frankly, answering the question most honestly, because of where I'm paying my most attention and actually minting things or buying things. I haven't really minted on Bitcoin because I can't get these damn whitelists. Don't have the time to get them. But like I was sweeping ordinals over the weekend, for example. And it's like, well, clearly that's because I think the best ROI is there at the moment. So that's where I'm looking at. Interesting conversation to start. We're going to get into all the headlines from the NFT market and crypto in just a little bit. One more interesting thing to discuss before we get there is this tweet from Ansem, which is kind of discussing or trying to think about the rotation. We started off the show speaking about meme coins and how they're going crazy at the moment. Now people are feeling a little bit of FOMO. Do we want to ape in here? Do you want to ape in later? Like, what's the entry point? What are the rotations? And so someone asked him in a tweet, how do you visualize this lasting the next 16 to 24 more months? How would that look? How is it even possible? And this is his outlook for how the money flows over the next 16 to 24 months, I guess. So first he says, and this is on the screen for people watching in, and I'll read it out for the people who are not. Meme coin mania plus Bitcoin all-time highs, while most alt BTC pairs get hit. So suggesting that there'll be a bunch of alts at the moment get hit as Bitcoin pumps through the all-time highs. Then profit taking into alt leaders, Sol and others. Then we will have Sol all-time highs and more Solana eco tokens and new dApps releasing. Then that goes into new L1 launches like Berachain, Anoma, don't even know what that is, and Sovereign, don't even know what that one is, though I guess we should be looking into those. Then that moves into a consolidation of majors after people have played around elsewhere. Then it goes into ETH and 4844 season. Then it goes into Monad. So Monad's like coming out really far down the line. And so this is, I know sometimes we're thinking on a really short time frame. This is like really playing out, going down quite far down the line. Legendary, what do you think of this kind of framework of how capital could be moving over the next 16 to 24 months?
I think it's an interesting framework. I think that I generally agree with that line of thought. Also, I think there's like more things that will happen as we've seen it. If we just look back we had a meme coin season before that then suddenly also had extended to Solana. So we will see like seasons from one major blockchain, whether that's ETH or BTC, also being reflected like almost like a ripple effect on other blockchains. And then it seems like that multiple narratives are going on at the same time, but in different locations. Generally speaking, I do agree with that, though. Maybe as an interesting added context, Anoma is a blockchain or a blockchain protocol that's built on like intent-centric architecture. That means if you look like at a typical DEX where you have an order book style matching, that's not the most efficient thing. And you look like at things like CowSwap, which are intent-based, which is just a new way to handle order flow in a more private and B more efficient way. And this is basically a blockchain building with that at heart.
Okay. Interesting stuff. So in general, you think this is like a reasonable way to look at it. One question I had, Legendary, before we hit some hands here, got Jack with his hand raised, Funky, Mindless too. We're going to hear from you in just a moment. One question I had here was actually about the price of Sol. So I messaged this to someone in a group chat just a moment ago. So we've got Solana. Like, looking at these prices, Bitcoin's up 3%, ETH is up 7.5% now. It's almost at 3.8K as we speak now. But Solana is down 1% at 132. Solana is lagging right now. And I just wanted to bring it up for discussion. Do we know what's going on here? I have read, and this is not anything guaranteed, but I wanted to bring it up in case someone knows something that we don't. I have read this tweet by Suzu, but also corroborated in other places, that the FTX estate is selling linear vesting Sol at large discounts, while crypto traders paying large funding to be long is quite tale of two cities. If SBF was around, he'd solve this unironically. Okay, forget that point. But the point is, FTX estate is, I think, rumored to be selling like a lot of this Solana, which is suppressing the price. Do we know anything more about that from your perspective, Legendary, Sammy? Is there a way for us to find out? And I'd love for people to say in the comments here if they know anything. Is there a way for us to figure out how much they've got, how much they've still got to sell? Would love to do some investigation there, because it does seem to be underperforming everything else. Legendary first.
I'm finding the numbers on that. Give me a couple seconds real quick.
Cool. Sammy?
Yeah, I think, well, we say that it hasn't really performed, but I'm pretty sure Sol was at about $100 a week ago. So it's probably had a decent rally. I think recently it's obviously dipped 1%, but it's had a decent rally the past week. I do think that, I mean, we've seen reports from Fidelity and a few other financial institutions that have priced Sol best case or bull case around $3,000, like best case probably $1,000, $300 for like bear case. So we're obviously not there yet. I do think that there was numbers being floated around on the FTX estate, which I think Legendary is looking for now. But these are institutions. They're not going to sell it all in one bulk. They're going to suppress the pump, sell into those pumps, and then just hold it a little bit as it goes through. But I think they do have those FTX people to pay, albeit at the lowest. I think it's probably the lowest point when those, I think it's fiat they're paying them in. So it's not as if you had 10 Sol, for instance, you're not going to be paying out $1,300. You're going to be paid out whatever it was, $80 back in the day. So they do need to pay those depositors and things. So yeah, I don't know. There probably is some truth to it. If I was an institution, I'd be selling it into the pumps because you do have those liabilities to pay as a liquidator.
Yeah, I mean, the liquidator's responsibility is just to liquidate. So I highly doubt that they have in their kind of their prerogative that they need to, their responsibility to like time the market. But yeah, so they ultimately just need to sell whenever the right time comes. Legendary, you've got some numbers here, would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, we found an article on TradingView that maybe is to be taken with a grain of salt, because it's also quoting people posting stuff on X. Okay. But the numbers that are being reported is that FTX had purchased Solana back at $16.24, and they placed their sell orders between $130 and $140 on Binance, and it's speculated that it's around 350,000 Sol that they are trying to liquidate in this process. But again, it's an article on TradingView quoting people from X, so take that with a grain of salt.
Okay, well, if anyone knows a better way to try to monitor that flow or get any more information, would love to get a DM about that, or just in the comments, which we'll monitor to try to look into it. Appreciate those thoughts. Definitely interesting conversation about those kind of flows, where we see things going over a bit of time, as well as analyzing a little bit on Solana there. Let's hit some hands before we get into the headlines. We'll try to get to all of you, but maybe we'll need to keep it moving and get into the headlines in just a moment. Jack, let's start with you. Welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, just to touch on the focus, it's so difficult at this point. You've got tokens going off, you've got freaking ordinals just absolutely melting faces. But I think the narrative now is getting a little bit too focused on ordinals. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a swing over to ETH and those sort of things again. But to your comment, B-Check, around like you just can't get whitelist for these things, just to put on people's radar, like the main ones I'm looking at the moment are probably Only Forces Fallen Collection, BTC Bangers, and then Incom BTC. They are the ones that I'm just seeing all my Discord DMs, all my like Twitter DMs, just people screaming for whitelist for, and a lot of people panicking as well. So I just want to put that on the radar, because I know we're still, you know, a bit more NFT and token focused space.
Yeah, fair enough. Appreciate that. Good to know what's coming in order to try to get exposure to it. Funky, welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts on maybe the Solana selling, the general situation, anything otherwise?
No, yeah. Thanks so much, GM, everybody. I just wanted to say, going back to that order flow, and I'll touch on the Sol thing in a second. Just Berachain, because you mentioned it in the flow of where this capital may rotate to. They had Barapalooza at ETH Denver. It was absolutely insane.
Nice.
How many people were there. Like, the hype for Berachain is just an 11. I mean, if it's a 1 to 10 scale, it's like the amps and, you know, Spinal Tap, like it's going to 11. It is absolutely mind bending how crazy that was.
Okay.
So I think, and the other one I would say is Movement Labs is probably going to, when it comes out, it's going to have a super lot of hype. Like Modular Day was also very, very big. To the Sol thing, I think that makes a lot of sense. We've seen how FTX is trying to make some of the creditors whole by liquidating a lot of the Sol tokens that it's been sitting on. And I think Sammy pointed out, like, it had a good run, you know, just somewhat recently too. So I think all that's feeding into it. But yeah, just want to chime in about some of that, or the capital flows a little bit.
Yep. Very, very fair point. It's always interesting to hear the perspective of from the IRL events, because it does seem to like take a couple of days and then like something happens off the back of it when people return and kind of express their bullishness via making some on-chain decision after attending some event. So like to hear those perspectives. Let's go to Mindless with your hand raised. Welcome to the stage, my friend. We're just going to get into the headlines in just a moment for everyone else listening in. But Mindless first, what are your thoughts here on Sol selling or the market conditions in general?
Good afternoon. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hope you're all well. Two things. I think initially it's very difficult to try and get some sort of definitive answer on the Sol situation as to if there are individuals with large tokens, whether FTX and SAM are still involved or not. The best thing you'll probably come across is a hunch. But I'll say this, it was the first to move in the months. So, you know, the 5 months where Ethereum just did 50%, Sol did 450%. So it kind of makes sense that it's cooling off. It's hitting its weekly resistance far quicker than everybody else out there. So there's that. And I'll also go back, if most of us have been here since 2015, 16, 17, 18, you remember the narrative that BTC is old and expensive and clunky and Ethereum was going to fix that. It's funny how when Ethereum scales, it ends up hitting the same problems. And I think most of the time Ethereum is now actually far more expensive than BTC. I find that funny.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting stuff. Nice to kind of bring that to our attention. Appreciate that, Mindless. Let's get into the headlines now from the snapshot, as always, which is pinned up top. If you do find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. So getting into the price action first, we've got crypto up a couple of percent. Bitcoin was at 66.7K. ETH is almost at 3.8K, up 5%. Solana down 1%, hovering around 130. In terms of the headlines, we've got BlackRock filing to purchase Bitcoin for its Strategic Income Opportunities Fund. Moon Overlord said, we went from maybe institutions will get an ETF through eventually to BlackRock clients being able to buy an ETF directly. Maybe institutions will get an ETF through eventually to BlackRock clients being able to buy an ETF. To now, BlackRock is just going to ape in themselves. That was the point that he was trying to make, which I almost messed up. Number two, Bitcoin ETFs is likely to hit 50 billion AUM today. This is from Eric Balkunas, more than halfway to passing gold ETFs in less than 2 months. I always like that comparison with gold ETFs because it's one we make quite often. And finally, SEC delays decision for BlackRock's spot ETH ETF. Wanted to discuss that mainly from the perspective is, like, do we think that that's better? A delay is better for kind of speculation to continue, so more time to keep buying and keep moving up. Getting into some price action, we've got CryptoPunks at 57.4, down 1%. Bored Apes down 7%. 18.9 ETH. Mutants down 7%, 3.3 ETH. DGods down 3%, 2.5 ETH. Captains down 6%, 5.3 ETH. Azuki's down 6%, 4.5 ETH. Penguins up 5% at 15.5. Mad Lads flat at 188 Solana, and Noun's winning bid was at 6.2 ETH. Had some huge sales yesterday across the kind of top NFT collections. Fidenza Monochrome selling for 496 ETH. CryptoPunk Alien selling for 4,500 ETH. And an Ether Rock selling for 209 ETH. Blockbuster sales across the board there. Legendary, those are the headlines. That is the price action. Before we get into some of them, any numbers catching your eye there?
Obviously, the big number is the Alien sale. I don't think that I need to get into it. Probably saw it like back to back on my timeline 12 times or something like that. Interesting number that you mentioned and that got me thinking, or had me thinking over the last couple of days, is captains. Because you still have, I kind of want to have a captains again. 5-ish ETH, 10 ETH, 10-ish ETH locked in meme. On the other hand, buying 5 ETH in meme and having that liquid also has a very nice appeal to it. Then again, that's a point that you love to always make, is that even in absence of the meme token that is locked into the captain still has value to it.
Definitely.
And I'm like, is the discount steep enough? Is it good enough to be buying captains or not? That is something that I'm going back and forth on a bit.
Interesting point. I do really like Ray and the Memeland ecosystem. I'm not in that one at the moment. I sold my captains to get more Animoca exposure via Mochaverse, but really awesome ecosystem, good founder, good team, great on the attention side of things as well. Interesting to consider there. Sammy, what do you think about this Bored Ape? Can we call it a collapse? Is it just a strong decline? Like the ecosystem, Bored Apes are down 7% at 18.9, Mutants at 3.3, down 7. Is this like farmers playing games, or is there something more structural here that's causing a lot of people to sell and the floor to kind of dump?
Well, I think recently you've had a number of things that have happened. So the Moonbirds acquisition, I don't know if there's some overhang from that.
Sure.
So there's probably been a few changes internally there. Gaga coming back in, so I don't know. Like, it was all perceived off as really well. And I think it's promising that he's come back in. I don't know what changes have happened. I think was it the playtest? The next playtest has happened recently. So maybe people are bearish on the actual gameplay from that, and maybe separating the Web3 gaming side of things from Bored Apes might take a bit of time. So potentially people are trying to exit their Bored Ape positions for other opportunities that are probably more apparent in the short-term future. It's hard to put like a pinpoint on it, but I think there's just a number of things that have happened recently that just potentially have left a sour taste in people's mouths. But you could see a bounce back. I've seen some people make reference to if you think buying Mutant Apes and Bored Apes at this price is a bargain, then check to see what happened with Clonex and Moonbirds. And I don't know if that's like they're going to follow the same trajectory. It's very hard to tell. But I think something has to change for that sentiment to shift. Just on that meme token stuff, I think that if you're bullish on a token that's called meme long term and it's already trading at a discount, then it's that the captains is probably a good buy, and that's not financial advice.
Yeah, fair point. On the Bored Ape stuff, I know what you mean. It does seem that there's a few things that have riled people, or maybe just disappointed people actually a little bit recently. And the thing is, and to be fair to them, it's not only them that are down, right? I think that's the reasonable point to make, because you started to suggest, well, maybe people are going to exit to try to look for other opportunities. And realistically, I think that's what a lot of NFT holders of whatever collection are saying right now. Like, they're saying, we're not sure about holding this NFT, particularly the ETH NFTs, right? It's not just them. Miladies are down 7% today. Pudgy Penguins, I think that we said they were up. Captains are down. Remilio's down. Azuki's down 6. Pixelmon down 10. Creeps down 10%. When I say 10, I'm saying percentage. DGod's down a few percent. Doodle's down 8% again. So it's like, it's not just them. I think a lot of people are looking at wherever their capital is locked up, and if meme coin stuff is going to keep going the way it does, it's going to be hard for people to say like, right, I'm comfortable with 20 ETH or 10 ETH locked up in this NFT that just seems to be sitting at the moment with no potential either token or immediate utility. And I do think that there's reasons for people to hold these, and there's sufficient connection been created between these collections and their holders. But, you know, if you're holding multiple, you might think, well, okay, well, I'll hold one and I'm going to sell a couple to go and gamble with the rest. Legendary, any reflections on that before we hit the headlines?
I think I very much agree with that. And just looking at the time, we have 40 minutes in.
Yeah,
Definitely want to be able to touch a bit on the headlines as well. So gonna hold back on additional commentary.
sounds good. Interesting discussion on various things going on, both on the market side and other opportunities. But let's touch on the headlines now. Starting with BlackRock filing to purchase Bitcoin for its strategic operations fund. Let me get this article up and share it with the people watching in. We've got BlackRock opening a new filing with the SEC to purchase more Bitcoin ETFs, according to new filing records by the Commission. BlackRock intends to use the new Bitcoin ETFs for its Strategic Income Opportunities Fund. The latest filing reads that the fund may acquire shares in exchange-traded products, ETPs, that seek to reflect generally the performance of the price of Bitcoin by directly holding Bitcoin, including shares of Bitcoin ETP sponsored by an affiliate of BlackRock. BlackRock current spot BTC ETF is the best performing one on the market, leading to the surge for Bitcoin ETFs. On Monday, the total Bitcoin ETF trading volume broke over $4 billion once again, reaching 5.4 billion, its second largest day since launch. Legendary, we've been speaking about the ETFs a lot. I think we've kind of come to the conclusion that this is kind of a new paradigm if this is the type of inflow that the ETFs are going to create. What do you think about this additional news? Do you see this, do you see us going past all-time highs like ASAP because of this relentless buying?
So first of all, I'm not really surprised by the BlackRock news as someone who has been following their fund portfolio quite a bit. And if you look at that Strategic Income Opportunities Fund, it is a fund that hasn't performed too well over the last years. And by that, I mean, it did 7% last year, it did -5% the year before, 1% in 2021, and 7% the years before that, which kind of puts it actually in the good years, it puts it exactly or a bit lower than the S&P 500, which is obviously not an actively managed fund. And in the other years, it's falling behind the global stock market. So that is a product by BlackRock that has, yes, a lot of TVL, or not for BlackRock's perspective, but for regular people, there's $36 billion in that. But it's not really performing great. And for them to use something like the BTC ETF, which they've obviously been heavily supporting to even make that possible, and then using that product to throw it into funds that are called strategic opportunities and are shaped in a way that they want to outperform the market, and then obviously using the asset that they have significantly contributed to even create makes a lot of sense. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is something that we will see more and more funds doing, because at the end of the day, as a fund manager, you're measured against the index, you're measured against the benchmark. Sure. And if you're not managing to outperform it, then people will ask you why you're taking 2 and 20 as your fees. And having BTC in that run and being able to slap it in and be like, yo, I have Bitcoin in my fund, I'm outperforming the stock market, I'm so great, is something that we will see many more people doing. And that is why I expect to see that buying pressure increasing even further.
Interesting idea. I like that. Sammy, what about this tweet from Eric Balkunas suggesting, or just stating again, providing this comparison, which I think we like more than anything IBIT brings in, is just padding the net number, throw in a rally, and the 10 will likely hit $50 billion in AUM tomorrow. And when he says 10, he means the 10 ETF providers, more than halfway to passing gold ETFs less than 2 months in. What do you think of the significance of the kind of gold comparison in particular? And where do you see this inflow moving?
Well, I think just even if you look at the inflows on Friday, I think the Genesis liquidation took place. So you saw quite a lot come out of the Grayscale outflows, and yet it was still a net income. So you're having a lot of this outflow pressure, but it's not really making a dent on the actual inflows. You're still net positive. So once that grayscale outflow slows down, you're going to have a lot more positivity coming through to the upside for those ETF inflows. For the comparison to gold, so my newsletter, which I've just posted now, there's I can't remember where I got it from, but there was like a chart that showed the inflows of ETFs, inflation adjusted, for gold versus Bitcoin.
Interesting.
And like the trajectory of Bitcoin is absolutely insane compared to gold. So I'll try and find the actual image and drop it in here, but it's probably worth just putting it on for people who are looking at the video.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be an interesting visual to see. I have read, or like when you look at these charts, like buying Bitcoin is just outrageously, like it outrageously would have been the clearest, obvious thing to do in hindsight. Like it just has outperformed everything on a proper time frame by such a big scale when you compare it to other assets. Okay, what I want to do now is I actually want to talk a little bit about ETH. Despite talking about all of this ETF inflow news, ETH is the one that is moving the most today, and I want to consider what that means for all the JPEGs. So let's do the Web3 roundup first from the snapshot, which is pinned up top, to get people up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the last 24 hours, in case you didn't know. And then we'll hit that final conversation on the ETH ETF potential delay. So as always, snapshot is pinned up top. Here's the roundup from it. First, Pepe and Whiff mentioned on Bloomberg crypto segment. If you haven't seen that, it was quite entertaining. You can see it from the Degenerate News account. You can get to there via the snapshot up top. They literally start talking about Pepe and Whiff, and they're clearly just like completely finding the whole thing very, very absurd. Number two, Pacman announces multiple changes and fixes for Blast to address early FUD. He said that holding funds on chain gives you Blast points, using dApps gives you Blast points and Blast gold and individual dApp airdrops. So it's strictly better to be using dApps, but that's only after the dApps have properly integrated with the API. It's important to note that gold has not been distributed to dApps yet. We'll make an announcement when the first gold has been distributed. This is one of my points about Blast at the moment, where people are getting a little bit upset. Basically, just a lot of the stuff is not usable yet. It's not completely ready. It's not completely integrated. So you're just going to have to give it a bit more time. And then I think they will sort those teething issues out. Next, 6 ordinal collections do more than $1 million in volume in the last 24 hours. So ordinal is still looking quite strong. And finally, Mutant Apes slide towards 3 ETH floor. Price is down 7% at 3.3 ETH. Getting into some more news, OSF announces professional Degen 5 mint details. Very cool free mint that OSF has designed. He's written a whole essay on it. It's really cool that he takes so much time to like plan it out and share the information. You can read like a whole article on the inspiration for it and the way that mint is working. He's included loads of community. So definitely go check it out to see if you could be in the raffle. Number 2, EtherFi announces commitment of $600 million to secure the Omni network. The deal, which will see EtherFi delegate a third of the $1.8 billion it has accumulated in total value locked, comes days after it completed a $23 million Series A fundraising round. I am restaking some ETH with EtherFi, so that was pretty significant news for me. And finally, Friendtech and Paradigm confirms points will be 100% community owned. Venture Coinist had this to say: that means if Friendtech launches at $1 billion valuation, airdrop points would be $10 per point. I've just included that as an opinion. I don't even understand how these investors would say that the points would be 100% community owned. I'm very skeptical of that. I don't really understand. So definitely take that with a pinch of salt unless you hear or research otherwise. But those are the rest of the headlines from around the space. Legendary, any quick reflections on that before we get into the ETH ETF delay and any reflections we have there for JPEGs?
Yeah, the Friendtech number seems an interesting one to think on and kind of find out how it comes to be, because it's so massively different from what it trades on Whales Market as well. I think Whales Market has it at $2.50. Thank you, Sammy. $2. So that's something that I would probably like to dive a bit deeper into, especially given the fact, and that's the last comment on that I've seen CBB and some other quite prominent people suddenly starting to post about Friendtech again, which makes me wonder, why is this happening all at the same time, and what's going on there?
Well, they've got a lot of points, right? Those people have got a lot of points. So I suspect they are very interested in the number being higher than it would be lower. That's my first thought. But what do you think about the VC point? Like, I don't understand. Why would, how could it be that there is no VC interest? How could it be that the points would be 100% community owned, unless they're just calling the VCs as part of the community and saying that, yeah, they're actually part of the community too. So therefore, it's still 100% owned. Like, what's the thinking there? Am I reading that wrong?
The points can be 100% community owned, and the VCs have a different bucket where they get their tokens from, not the airdrop from the points. They have their investment bucket where they get their like actual tokens from.
Okay, I see what you mean. I guess I think, right, I see what you mean. I think either way, that type of language is
That type
intended
of language is very, very weird, and
it's
it might be a bit
intended to deceive,
misleading.
right? It's
Yeah.
intended to deceive in the sense that
Yeah,
it's trying to
agree.
make people think that there's no that they suddenly don't have any allocation, when, as you say, there must be an alternative way for them to see the return on their investment.
Paradigm is not taking your points. They're getting the token straight.
Yeah. Okay. That's actually, yeah. I guess the way they've worded it is open to that interpretation. So interesting stuff. Definitely wanted to touch on that. Let's get into the ETH ETF delay. We've got 8 minutes left on this, which I think is the right amount. I'll share it up on screen for the people who are watching in, and I'll read it for those who are not. We have the SEC pushing back BlackRock yesterday, Fidelity spot Ethereum ETF proposals. The SEC has again delayed its decision on spot Ethereum ETF applications from BlackRock and Fidelity as the analysts continue to tip May as the month to watch. I don't know how big of a deal this was necessarily, because as the article shows, James Safer, who's been working at Bloomberg reporting on this stuff, said that the SEC so this was actually a tweet from a while ago talking about the delay. He says the only date that matters, this is the more important date, the only date that matters for spot ETH ETFs at this time is May the 23rd, which is VanEck's final deadline date. So Legendary, we are in March now. So that's April, May. It's like 2 and a bit months away. What are your thoughts on ETH now in the run up to this final deadline date in May? And what are the implications for NFTs?
First of all, I think, yes, the final date is May, but I do think the dates in between matter, like from a sentiment perspective. I know nobody has like the expectation to really see the ETF before May.
Sure.
But just the fact that the market didn't, sidetrack, or ETH specifically didn't sidetrack a bit, basically just marched from 3.6 to 3.7K without giving a damn about the fact that that decision got postponed once more is a very strong sign. In terms of the NFT market, I think it's a cycle that very much reminds me of what we've seen in the last bull market. If you look at the Bored Ape run, that didn't happen in an environment where ETH was running towards all-time high, but rather in an environment where ETH was correcting. People want to be liquid. People are posting publicly about wanting to be liquid. Easy had that post, and some people in the comments were furious about him wanting to sell his JPEGs.
Yeah.
So we're like still in that kind of phase where liquidity is king. People are afraid that the JPEGs go to zero, and then are like bashing around when people actually talk about selling their NFT portfolio. And I think with exceptions, of course, right, for things that have a token upcoming, for things that are trending on the timeline, but generally speaking, I think that ETH needs, bluntly put, to chill a bit for money to flow back into NFTs. And I think we see it. We see that volatility stronger than we've seen it in the last bull market, just for the sole reason that now lending has become such a massive factor. And if a collection gets underwater quickly, if people are putting out their liquidity from the lending markets, that increases also the downwards momentum. And that's just a factor that we didn't have in the last bull cycle. So this is why maybe the bleed now seems a bit stronger. And also from an emotional perspective, last cycle, obviously we didn't didn't have the all-time highs of NFTs, like
Sure.
when it wasn't 100 ETH and was going down from there. Now we're still benchmarking against last cycle highs and like, oh fuck, apes are down 80% or whatever. So I think those factors just make it look worse on the timeline, but I think we see the same cycle play out as we've seen it the last time, and it's nothing that I like seriously worry about. With that being said, though, I am also like wanting to be more liquid now, so I have separated some of my less high conviction plays just in order to be able to have some more liquid plays for meme coins or other stuff as well.
That's so funny. That's a nice way it's a very formal way to put it. You have separated some of your NFTs, like some legal decision that you've had to undertake. They have been separated from your serious wallet, and they will be dealt with. They'll be taken to the back and shot.
Beautiful. You can't sell shame me if I just say, look, they've been separated from my wallet.
They've been separated from a wallet that you do control. Love it. Okay, that's a nice way to put it. I'm going to start saying that, I think. Okay, Sammy, ETH ETF coming next 2 months. I'll give my take on this after, but like, do we see the same thing that happened with Bitcoin? Like, is it just going to keep running in between? There's been a hell of a lot of FUD on the timeline, mostly from actually the Bloomberg guys who talk about the Bitcoin ETF being like the headline, the main event. And basically the analogy that was used is like this ETH ETF is like the opening act coming on after the headline. And that was used by these ETF analysts. Like, do you think there's any validity to that? Is there reason for ETH holders to be like a little bit like, do you think it could be a suppressed event because it's kind of like the opening act coming on after the headline?
Well, I think the underlying asset's different. So sure. Bitcoin's just the economics behind it's different. It's 21 million Bitcoins, whereas I think ETH deflationary, it has a yield. You've got discounted cash flow models and stuff like that, which institutions love. You look at bonds, for instance. Sure. So I think the dynamic behind it is just very different. I think that the stuff that you can use ETH for is different. That might change as these L2s and stuff are built out on Bitcoin. But I think that the fact that supply isn't capped for ETH and it's through that deflationary model, if you look at ultrasound money or whatever, just to monitor it, but I think that offers a different like paradigm to what Bitcoin does. So I think it's just completely different. I don't know how that's going to play out in terms of an ETF and whether people will have demand for it. But to me, I think that it's just like it's like an application smart contract blockchain versus Bitcoin, which is slightly different. It's seen by institutions as maybe this reliable store of value at some point. Sure.
So, I mean, I agree with everything that you said. I guess we're just trying to think on, like, is the market able to understand that? My favorite Bitcoin bull, Doc Kruger, I think is it Fred Kruger? Is his name on Twitter? Was saying like his biggest concern, because he's not an ETH maxi, like he doesn't like ETH. He's a complete Bitcoin maxi. His main concern is the ETH ETF, because he doesn't think that the market, like generally, despite the fact maybe, fine, ETH is different, it does cool stuff, it's useful for whatever reason, but he doesn't think that the market can cope with like an additional crypto ETF getting passed right now and then deflecting the attention away from the Bitcoin one. And he thinks Bitcoin's going to go up like exponentially at the moment, but if there's another one to compete with it right away, it will hinder Bitcoin's growth. It's still going to go up in his opinion, but it's going to hinder it. I kind of agree with that in the sense that, it's going to attract some capital. But I kind of disagreed with the idea that it's going to be significantly like a non-event. I think it's obviously going to have a lower market cap. It's going to attract less than Bitcoin. But I think, in the same way that there are all different types of assets constantly competing with each other to attract capital, it will just be an alternative option. Legendary, do you have any reflection there just before we close out?
Yeah, at first I thought I agree with this take, but then I realized I disagree, because you could make the same argument now. You have BTC moving up because of the inflows into the ETFs, but at the same time, ETH is also pumping.
Yeah.
And that's not pumping just because BTC goes up. Like someone is actually buying it in order for the price to go up. And
Sure.
whoever that person is didn't get distracted by the BTC ETF, but saw it maybe more so as a buy reason. So the market is already handling that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that this is going to be a main worry to have two ETFs trading at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think I think it's like overthinking it. Like right now, as things stand, people can buy spot of both, and people do. Like, and I guess ultimately it would just be the same thing, but just on an institutional level. Those are our opinions. We do not know anything for sure. So please do make your own decisions and exercise your own judgment. But guys, we hope that has been an interesting show for you. Kind of went around the houses a little bit today, discussing all kinds of angles for the NFT market, crypto itself, ETFs, and all sorts. We do this every single day, Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern time, 12 p.m. GMT for 1 hour, live on X, purely on audio in this space, live on X, also on video, and also increasingly with an increasing number of people watching in on YouTube. So please do give us a follow. The main account is Modern Market. We also have B-Check on stage, Legendary on stage, Sammy on stage as the main contributors, and also follow our speakers, always providing great context. We've got Jack, Funky, and Tiro with us. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to my co-host. Thank you to our speakers. And thank you for joining us. We will see you again tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.